Welcome. Sandoval Communications presents video streaming of this special board meeting to address the 2021 budget of Sandoval's HOA. The live stream is simulcast on Sandoval's official communications Facebook page, Sandoval Cape Coral. Alternate viewing of this meeting is also available for your convenience 24/7 on our YouTube channel, Sandoval Video Box, and on Sandoval's website, www.livesandoval.com. Consider subscribing to support Sandoval Video Box on YouTube by clicking both the subscribe button and bell to be notified of future meetings and presentations by Sandoval Communications. The meeting will begin shortly. Sandoval Communications thanks you for your support and participation by watching this meeting.
Good afternoon. This is the budget adoption meeting. Let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So we'll take roll call, please. Vice President Spooner.
Present in person.
Treasurer Tubb.
Present here.
Director Palmer.
Here.
Director DeFilippis. He's not able to make it today. Director Roper.
Present.
And Director Wells. Great, thank you. We've established quorum. So General Manager Casey, please confirm proof of notice. Thank you.
Yes, I have proof of notice here, affidavit.
Perfect. And do we have resident comments on today's agenda item?
Yes, we have received 17 resident comments in regards to feedback on the proposed 2021 budget sent out to the residents. And for the sake of time, we've listed the topics. A lot of them were similar, and so we've summarized those. And the first one, we had comments of opinions, questions pertaining to the dues not going up this year, as well as wanting the telecommunications fund to stay as it has been accumulating monies into this fund. The next one, we had questions asking about why there were, and I don't know, do you want to discuss one by one, or?
Why don't you give them to us first, and then we'll discuss them.
Okay. So the first one is in regards to wanting the dues to stay the same and then wanting the telecommunications fund to stay as it is. For management, this was something discussed with Financial Committee, the board. We sent out the proposed budget, so all were in agreement. I know there was some, but the vote was to proceed forward. Is anything changed at this time?
I had one question. I thought that the residents sent in a comment that they should be read, because if there was a regular meeting that wasn't virtual, they would be able to stand up and give us their comments.
Okay. Okay, it's going to take a little bit.
Okay.
Well, then we're going to wind up answering the same thing 8 times.
Well, if they were standing up, they would be able to ask the same question 8 times.
Right, so she can read through them, and then because she has them clustered.
I mean, I think if the residents went to the trouble to write a comment, I think, we deserve to hear it.
As opposed to copy and paste it.
Well, that's your
That's
comment.
exactly what it was, pretty much. I mean, the first one is Michael Thalberg and proposed budget. I want to go on the record strongly opposing taking money from the telecommunications surplus to fund increases in the operating budget. First of all, it is a great concern to me that the board and the treasurer in particular, I'm not going to slander, so I'll bypass that. Where is it? The treasurer, okay. So, yeah, I'm not going to read that also. I believe the board should redo the budget, leaving the surplus alone, and cut any expenses it can and increase assessments if necessary. Let's be completely transparent. If increased assessments are necessary, tell us why and how much. We do not want to face a large increase a couple years down the road because of this ploy. Okay. Next one. I agree. Richard Hernandez. And this one is, I agree with, there was another resident that sent in. Well, the other resident didn't send in, so I can't read this one. The number of named storms has significantly increased the climate change. We will be impacted. It is just a matter of time. It is time to put some negotiating skills to test. There's other companies out there. We've spent a lot more on landscaping, yet the community has never looked so bad. This one is in regards to 2021 budget. I'm sorry, this is Marge and Jack Nixon. And proposed 2021 budget does not include a column anticipated expected expenses as it has December 31st, 2020. In fact, it looks like this was blacked out. My career is in finance, and I was never asked to consider a budget without this information, nor should the Sandoval residents. Comparison to the previous year's budget is not sufficient. Perhaps you could bring this to the board's attention, and we'll address. Again, I've summarized these, so I'll respond to that. So I thank you for these so far. And the same thing. That was from Nixon. Double check. Marge and Jack. It was just okay. Another one from Richard Hernandez. On the proposed budget, I know this is a minor amount, line 5250, dues, education, staff, meetings, 1680. That's 1,680. Why does Sandoval need to budget for this? We hire a management company that's supposed to provide quality employees. These employees work for the management company. If they leave, they'll take their qualifications with them that we would pay for under our budget. John Bianco, I strongly agree with, again, this one I'm not able to read, unfortunately. There's no additional, I can read. I feel it is more physical approach going forward. So that one I can't. Please reconsider utilizing the telecommunication fund to offset budget deficits. I'm sorry, Paul, this is from Paul Weatherby. This fund was not established for this purpose, and you should be reviewing the budget line by line to find savings and balance. The budget with the reserves forecasted. The landscaping expense seems to be increasing at an extremely fast pace, possibly out of control. The majority of the residents are happy with their landscaping at the present time. Also, what is insurance liability and why is it increasing such a high amount, and why are the personnel and management fees increasing to the degree they are? It looks like you are setting this budget up, and that I'm not going to read because it's the next one. I would like to, Brett Reeves. I would like to express my opinion and vote for the new. So there's this a side vote going on that's not actually a vote that's going on. So I'm not really sure how to take this one because it's a side. It was just forwarded. It's not an option that anyone has brought from the board, but I'll read. Last year, the board. And then again, this is just hearsay off of a forwarded email, so it's not my opinion. This is from Brett Reeves. Oh, I'm not going to read that because option 2 is what he requests, is what he wants, and I'm not sure, but I'll just read it. Sandoval finds itself at a crossroad. Do we want to fly without a safety net? The board majority has opted to, thankfully, two directors, Al and Dawn, have proposed a more balanced approach, which would entail continued, albeit lesser, contributions to the telecommunications surplus and modest assessment increases starting in 2021. We believe that it is the more responsible approach, but it absolutely must be combined with spending discipline going forward to guard against a provident depletion of the telecommunications surplus. It would be prudent to enumerate permitted uses of those funds, such as storm damage. Okay. I'm going to take a little pause and have a sip of water real quick. All right. Mary Lou Flynn? Yes, thank you. I oppose the money going from the surplus we were expecting from the CenturyLink account to go to landscaping. How was this decision made? Who voted on it? And most of all, why hasn't the clubhouse renovation been started? I bought in Sandoval for the amenities, and there are none that does not subject me to hot weather or rain. This is not why I pay dues to Sandoval. In fact, my quilting club will now be meeting at the Yacht Club in Fort Myers. We cannot wait another year to get space to proceed with our quilting education and charity projects. Full name, Craig Dunleavy. The majority of this As a member of the Community HOA Board of Directors, you're in a position of trust and required to act in the best interest of the community's 1425 resident households. Board members need to make informed decisions, and in this regard, of what will be the obligatory of this community's safety net through the telecommunications surplus. There was not any action by the board to include any input from the community residents in regards to the telecommunications surplus safety net. And I do not believe to date that the board, that there have been a single instance in which there was community input sought. The previous board president had at least 3 community workshops allowing input from the community's residents. Okay. Most, if not all, residents were told the telecommunications surplus when looking to move forward into Sandoval, knowing that the HOA and community through 2026 would be financially strong and that there would most likely not be a need for HOA payment increases. Well, the majority of Okay. We read Brett Reeves. Sorry. Yeah. I just want to make sure. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I read all that part of it, right? Okay. This is another one supporting, again, not a vote we have going on, but Dan Fitzgerald, thank you. It says, my question to the board for the budget meeting is, will there be an alternative plan to the proposed budget funding prepared, and will there be an opportunity for residents to choose before the budget goes into effect? This is Craig Snyder. What was sent to us was only the proposed budgets with no actual spending numbers for the year. We need to see where and how much money has been spent. Without that, the proposed budget doesn't tell us much. Just because we have money now doesn't mean we need to spend it. By including a majority of the telecommunications money in the budget now, there will come a day when we face large HOA dues increases. When the telecommunications fund ends in 2026, and when the telecommunications funds, okay, it's not accurate. Okay, so when the telecommunications fund ends in 2026, we will likely not find cable and internet. I think CenturyLink is what is meant there instead of that telecommunications fund. Okay. Let's say the cost is $155 per month. HOA fees will have to go up $100 per month. We need an emergency fund in place in case of hurricane, tornado, or other disaster. If we spend down telecommunication fund now, we will have very little money for an emergency. Having 3 months expenses saved would require $750,000 plus. We need to work towards saving money by taking small HOA increases each year to maintain a sound financial position. If the proposed 2021 budget is approved, large HOA dues increases will be coming in the future. My wife and I definitely agree. We seem to have lost sight of the original concept of use of accruing surplus. Okay. I believe we all want to be good stewards of Sandoval's budget. From our hired management group, I'm sorry. That one doesn't have JP and Odette Fauzi was this last one. Tom Keeman. I believe we all want to be good stewards of Sandoval's budget. From our hired management group, our volunteer board and residents. As our GM, I would hope that you would weigh in heavily at the budget meeting with Pope's expert recommendation on what would be responsible amount to have set aside for surplus fund, such as the telecommunication fund. Set that as our goal. If necessary, make modest adjustments to our quarterly dues to achieve our surplus goal. Of course, attention should always be given to cost. Marlene Poirier, Kelsey, which possibly she meant Casey. We know that the vote on the budget is scheduled for tomorrow. There will be a lot of residents that now know things about the budget that they don't like. Therefore, I feel the vote should be postponed. We knew nothing about the budget until last minute. Now it is already being voted on. This is the first time in 14 years that I've lived here as a resident, have not had enough time to look at the budget and discuss it with friends. We will be in trouble in the future if this budget is adopted and if we also stop contributing to the telefund. Another comment that I have to make is who negotiated a new contract with Crawford that included a 28.5% increase, which I'm guessing this would be not from this budget, a previous year. Who in this economy is getting 28.5% increase? That is ridiculous. They are doing a good job, but not good enough to warrant a 28.5% increase. Please give the board some wisdom and ask them to reconsider their vote. I believe that Don and Al are in a opposition to this manner of budgeting. They proposed a slight HOA dues increase and to leave the telecommunications fund alone. This is a much more, and sorry, I should have left that part out because I don't know if that's, yeah, I think that is true. Okay, this is much more financially sound approach. I hope that you will try to help the resident that are in opposition. There are many of us. I hope that you have made their voices heard. John Stick. Borrowing from one surplus to cover the other expenses, not work for long. I've seen it before. I would rather see small increases in the HOA as needed rather than huge increase a few years from now. I'm sure you will have some complaints, but the small increases are a lot easier to swallow than larger ones. Then a big one a few years from now. Okay. The proposed budget that was recently mailed to the Sandoval residents is very misleading, even for a person versed in financial reporting. Budgeting and financial statements. The budget was not transparent and difficult to discern, especially if one relies on the summary at the bottom of page 1 to make an educated evaluation. Yes, residents are looking each year to see, and this is from, Anthony Lekanowicz. Yes, residents are looking each year to see if their HOA assessments are increased or not. That's usually all they care about, especially if they are retired. So on the surface, it appears that our fees are being held in check. However, the summary does not state the expenses have increased significantly. The statement that the master quarterly dues in 2021 is staying the same is misleading. Our expenses have increased significantly, but much of it, if not most of the increases, is being funded by taking money out of the bulk telecommunication savings, which was a substantial amount in 2019. This fund savings set aside was never intended to be used for normal operating expenses. The residents of Sandoval accepted the idea of setting aside the savings from bulk telecommunications when the communications contract was negotiated with CenturyLink, resulting in a $600K per year savings. After paying increased costs with Envera, residents agreed to set the net savings aside and not even included it as part of our normal expenses. The current board and the 2019 board has spent a significant part of savings. The fund will be further depleted in 2021. So to say our quarterly fees have not increased is misleading. The increased spending is being funded by money the residents have saved. The increase in Sandoval expenses is even more than appears on the surface. Consider the increases in spending in 2019 and 2020, and then the 2021 budget, and we have quite a large increase in spending. At most, residents should only have to contend with normal inflationary cost increases. Inflation over the past 5 years, has been very low to non-existent. What happens when we exhaust the bulk telecommunication savings? I suspect the board is already considering eliminating cable internet and not reducing the fees that are going to be paid to CenturyLink for the service. Honestly, even with a large increase in spending over the last 2 years, much of the spending for pet projects have resulted in benefits to very few people. Our landscaping was fine. Mr. DeFilippo stated in a meeting that our landscape is not what it used to be. That took every resident in the meeting by surprise. Did we need a cover for the playground given it is used by probably 1% of the residents? What are we getting incrementally for the increase in personnel? I believe I'm about at the 3 minutes, so I'm just going to summarize the last two parts. Once again, with the CenturyLink and the CenturyLink again, which we'll touch base on those. Yes. So I can, whatever the direction the board would like to go, I can summarize the responses back from.
Could I make a suggestion, if you don't mind? And this is just a suggestion. It sounds like we have a couple areas. One of them is the actual budget itself, the substance of the budget. And then we have the funding source of the budget. I'd like to deal with them separately. Is that fair? Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, I'm not trying to run the meeting, but frankly, I think those are two important components that we should address.
I agree.
I agree.
Do you want to start with the substance of the budget, go around the room and see if there's any changes that we'd like to make or comments?
That's fine. That's fine. Did you want to preface something or?
No.
All right, do you want to start, Ron?
On the budget line 5315, I would like to change it from website, which should be covered by the new management company, to communications. I want to make sure that money is clearly directed towards the communications. Just a comment on landscaping. It was my understanding that the head of landscaping and the landscaping committee asked for $35,500 for improvements to areas of our landscaping and the Pine Island Gate landscaping. Based on the GM's recommendation, they were allotted $15,000. I didn't hear any objections from anyone in this room at that point, and it was supported by the landscaping chair, the landscaping committee, and the GM. Based upon that, I was okay with it. In addition, they asked for $20,000 for tree trimming, additional. They were given $10,000. I was told by the landscaping chair this was necessary, and also by the landscaping committee. And again, no one on this board objected to any of this at the prior to budget meetings. So again, I agreed to that. So the increase would be, I believe, $25,000. That's my comments with regard to the substance of the budget.
And I just want to make a point, too, that there was some concern raised by the residents in that there was no discussion. As everyone knows, the treasurer provides a financial report at every meeting. The monthly financials are posted to the website. At the October 22nd board meeting, the 2021 budget was a specific agenda item. There was discussion. And there was follow-up with the workshop that was posted, proper notice, posted for, and was held on Wednesday, October 28th. And then in preparation for this meeting on the 19th, the general manager and the staff provided residents with the 14-day advance notice of the, whether email, if you opted in for emails, or the U.S. Postal Service delivery of the proposed budget. So I just want to correct that statement that was referenced.
Regarding that, too, 2019 was the first time we ever did a budget workshop. Is that fair to say, Don?
It was last year.
Yeah.
So we did it at the end of 2019.
Yeah, prior to 2019.
Right,
did
for
you
the
do
20
any workshop
budget.
budgets or any discussion of the
Correct.
budget before the final meeting?
Not to my knowledge.
So last year was the first year that we did a budget workshop, and we had 2 prior budget meetings this year. Is that correct?
We had one with the board, and then you had one with the finance committee.
Oh, no, we had two with the board, didn't we? We've had 2 meetings with the board and the finance committee.
Okay.
And the budget that's presented to you is the budget the finance committee sent to the board.
Okay, who else? Substance of the budget? Comments?
You want to talk about it specifically?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I took great exception to Mr. Michael Thaylenberg's intention that I'd lied to the community. If he's taken the time to look at our financial statements that are posted every month on the website, he'd see what's been done, and that nothing I've said has been in contrast to what's posted on the website. But if you look at our budget in total, as the way it's been presented to us, it's $403,000 less going into the telecommunications fund. But we've got $87,000 in increases on there that come from Pope's proposals for next year, should they have been retained as our next year's management company. So our budget is reflecting what we anticipated those expenditures to be. If we don't spend it, we'll have money left over to go into our fund balance. $142,000 of the increase is because of our general liability insurance. People may or may not realize that in 2017 and 18 we had some substantial claims against us, and the prior management didn't act on those. They just ignored it, said the insurance company will take care of it. Well, the insurance company took care of it by paying out money and reserving money. And last year, after we approved the budget, for $36,000 for our general liability insurance. We got a bill for $150,000. So that was a big bust last year. We have included money for this year's increase in the general liability insurance of $142,000 as part of this budget. Landscaping is up $28,000. Pope personnel was $87. So we come up with about $282,000, and the increases are from Pope, landscaping, and insurance. Contingency, we budgeted to try to create some money to go into our fund balance at the end of the year of $28,000 more. Maintenance is up by $12,000. So for the $430,000 reduction in bulk telecom, we've got about $380,000, $390,000 in those expenses. So if you're not going to fund them out of that, we got to fund them out of something.
Just a clarification on landscaping. It's my understanding there wasn't an increase in the general landscaping, so what you're discussing is the two line items that were extra that the landscaping committee requested, but our contract is not any higher
True.
than it was in 2019.
That is for our internal use for things that we choose to do, not for Crawford or Down to Earth. Crawford and Down to Earth's contracts do not change. In fact, Crawford's contract is down by $3,000 this year, I believe, from $3,600 from last year.
So these are for extras?
Extras, yes.
I'd also like to make the comment that the landscape went up to the whatever the percentage was, and the reason for that was not that they're getting more money, but we covered areas that had been taken out of previous contracts to include the perimeter, to include Phase 3, and that's why that budget went up significantly. And that had nothing to do with frivolous spending on landscaping. It was what was required in order to provide the service and provide all the areas of our community that needed landscaping. And there was an RFP, and there were several bids, and Crawford had the best bid, and that's how they got this contract. And if they hadn't gotten it, it would have been higher than that number.
And I'd like to add that a lot of these letters that we got threw around a 28.5% increase, which is totally fallacious. That's not. It was like a 14% increase because of the reasons Don just laid out. People just took numbers from a random email they got, never did any fact checking, and just threw them back out again, assuming they were gospel. People need to do fact checks.
I mean, if we have to discuss something about landscaping, it's the increase, the additional $25,000. We had been going at 60, and all of a sudden, that went up another 25. To me, that was a shock and a surprise, and I brought that up at one of our other meetings, but there were no comments after I brought it up. So the fact that you said there were no comments, it wasn't that I didn't point it out.
Well, it wasn't that there were no comments or no objections to it.
Well, I wouldn't have brought it up if I thought it was that.
Well,
I thought that was a large increase that I didn't know that, other than, somebody flush with money would be able to afford. So.
Well, again, I spoke with the landscaping chair, the landscaping committee, the GM, and they all said it was necessary. That's their area of expertise. If we don't think we can afford it, well, then this board needs to discuss that, and I'm open to it. I'm open to removing it if it's.
Well, I mean, you can afford it if you've got it in the budget and you're using telecommunications funds in order to pay for it, and if you were
using telecommunications funds, we're using homeowner funds that we're not putting into the telecommunications.
Any way you want to spin it, it's fine.
So, can we afford it?
Well, I think it's a question. As the budget is laid out, you've provided the money for it, and you're going to provide the money for it going forward. So I think, the $403,000 that is going out of the telecommunications this year will go out the next 4 years to 2026. And if you do the math on that, that'll be $2.4 million of the telecommunications fund that was been reallocated to operations. So I just think we all need to be aware of what these numbers mean, because once that number is baked into the budget, that then has to travel forward, which would also mean that in 2026, that fund will not; those funds will no longer be available, and there will have to be an increase in HOA assessments in order to take care of that. In addition to that, I don't think you'll ever find a internet and cable that will provide you at $53, so there's going to be a huge increase in that as well. So that 1 year in 2026, you're going to have a double whammy. You're going to have to come up with your $403,000. And if you take the extra 134 that still remains in that and put that towards operation, then that will go to 500,000. So just so we all understand what's coming in the future, that's why Al and I felt that, you know, a modest increase each year gets you used to that rather than a monster when you come down the road.
Well, can I just interject real quickly? Just to be clear, we're dividing up this between funding source and the substance of the budget. My question wasn't the funding source. My question was for us to take a position on landscaping budget. And I still have not heard anyone on this board take a position other than me. So I would like to hear what people's input is on this lineup.
Mine was more around the source, so we can.
Mine's on landscape. So, I'm sorry. So with the landscaping, currently there's a Phase 3 unfunded landscaping request. So I know the Phase 3 was included in the Crawford scope of work with the contract that was negotiated prior to this board being seated. So I would support the landscaping increase in that. Again, this was something that the Phase 3 was to be included.
That was included. This increase in this 60 to 80 some thousand has nothing to do with the Phase 3 increase. That was included in the original.
Landscaping committee's request.
It does. It's for a couple items. They inherited some prior landscape, bad grass, and different situations where they need those monies to catch up. As well as Phase 3. The request for Phase 3 is the Pine Island entrance, things that weren't done similar to the other phases.
I'll take exception to that. The grass that you're talking about was replaced by Taylor Morrison, so that was not an unfunded item, and that was one of the things that they came in here and they replaced. So I don't know that that would be something that we could say that that's going for. And I mean, I wish that this had been. I didn't even see the landscape proposal. All I saw was the numbers. I still haven't seen the landscape proposal. I have no idea what's in it. But you know, if we are going to discuss doing something at Pine Island, I think that should have been a budget line item that, you know, under landscaping that we discussed. And you know, apparently that's what this catch-all, this increase is going to be. So does that mean that that's just a temporary one-year increase so that you can do things at Pine Island, or is it that something that's going to be in the budget going forward?
That was my understanding. And again, we're talking about $15,000 for repairs and for the Pine Island gate, not talking about the $10,000 for tree trimming. Can Casey, could you give us a little more explanation on what this money is going to be used for and whether we actually need to spend it?
Sure. Based off residents' requests and complaints coming in, and requests and complaints in regards to the Pine Island entrance and needs there, irrigation and things like that, you know, if you just are increasing $15,000, that project is potentially $13,000. So that is your increase from now. As general manager, as you know, it's my responsibility to work with, not just say, okay, here's the amount, this is all approved. We really need to see what gets spent. If there's any type of savings that can be done, it's not a here and go run with it type of thing, at least from my perspective. So I can only go off of the past. It's what has been spent, will be spent for 2020, and the request for just even that item, if you're going to replace and move and do all these other things, I have to go off of, you know, as of right now, I have to go off of history of what's been spent for these items of replacement, repairs. Yes, say there is some type of storm. These funds would be used for that if they're there, before just coming up with something else to do that that. But there's some items on here.
I don't think the landscape, 60 or 80,000, has anything to do with storm. I think that I don't think that has to do with storm replacement.
I want to be clear, and I'm just not clear on why we're saying 60 or 80,000.
Well, the line item was 60, and it was approved on this last year's budget at 64,000.
Okay.
And that's for things that are seen that need to be taken care of. And I think this year a lot of things were moved around. We did a lot of things with that money, and I think I'm not opposed to any of that. Sure. But if you wanted to increase above that number, then I think that we should have all been provided with a proposal, not that the community wants, or so 2 or 3 residents want the Pine Island Gate area increased. And if that's the case, then I think, that should have been a Pine Island package, and then landscaping at X number of dollars, and then if we wanted to approve, as you mentioned in the past, if you have things you want to do in the future, then you need to say, okay, let's put this in the budget, earmark it, and then assess in order to pay for it.
Well, I have a possible solution then. We are trying to build up a contingency account, so we have some actual cash flow to hopefully get to the 2-month goal of having backup funds. Why don't we put these additional funds into the contingency gel line until we get an appropriate plan for the Pine Island Gate, look at actual costs, and then evaluate that secondary?
I'm in favor of that.
I think that's fair, because obviously we need to take a very close look at every single dollar we're spending, make sure it's absolutely necessary. We're talking about $15,000 here.
Well, actually, you're talking about going from 64 to 80.
15,000 in addition from last year, and the 10,000 is for tree trimming, which is the next topic, obviously.
Well, the tree trimming, I think, where that is entailed, so we have trees here that have coconuts, and we have trees that have to be trimmed not once a year, but twice a year for safety reasons. So we have to make sure we have enough in the budget for that. We spent a lot on last year's budget, and I think everyone needs to be aware of that. We used the 15 that was in it. We used 3 years of the money that was in the reserve and bundled it into 1 year so that we would be able to trim every tree in Sandoval.
And we struggled to do that.
And we struggled to do that, and we did it, and that was done. But we now forget about that. And unfortunately, these trees are still growing. And, there's going to be more trimming that's going to be needed down the road. But, I think there needs to be a good explanation, which I'm trying to give you, and maybe I'm not quite all accurate on that, but that why that had to increase from 15 to 25.
I was right there with you with this concern. It was a liability concern, and frankly, I don't disagree. Just before we get to the tree trimming, can we maybe go around the room and see if there's any support for my at least proposition in terms of moving the 15,000 over to contingency until we get a cohesive plan for the Pine Island Gate?
Either that or have a gel line item for Pine Island that you want to utilize that for, and I don't have any problem with that either.
I'm fine with either one.
But we don't know the 15,000 is for Pine Island.
Well, we're going to need to get a proposition.
If it's not, then that's why we should. That's why before we approve a budget, we should have seen this landscape proposal as a board, so that we could have run over it, gone through it, and then not just taken somebody's word for it. I never got a copy. How many in this board has seen the landscape proposal that, for whatever your big number was, that was asked? I haven't.
Yeah, and you're welcome to take a look at it. The finance it got in the day we had meeting. It was very delayed.
Well, it doesn't matter when he got it. It's a significant item. I think that it deserves a full vetting, no matter when you get it.
Well, I think we're giving that an opportunity, so we can do that as long as we get support from it. I think we've got 2 people's support in that plan. Does anyone object to proceeding on that basis?
Yeah, and it's a little bit broader than Pine Island. There's some trees on the parkway that need to be replaced also, that were taken out, some royal palms that was included in that the Phase 3 Pine Island.
I mean, do we need them?
Well,
the palm trees that were put on Phase 3 were encroached upon by the oak trees, and there was significant discussion as to whether they should have been planted there in the first place.
Correct.
So if we've lost some, do they have to be put back in, or maybe that?
It might be a legal question, frankly, unfortunately.
Well, not really, because they were put in. I think in fact, Allison is the one who said that the positioning of these was not. There were some issues with that. So to say that you need to replace them, I'm not so sure that necessarily is an expense. When you're trying to save dollars,
Correct. And it is a very good point, and it's why we have to always make sure we have a cohesive plan anytime we're planting any large trees, because putting them in is easy. Taking them out creates potentially some
and
issues.
maintaining them while they're in
legally.
They're trimming.
So Brown, the 15K that you're referencing is the 5620 line item, is it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So you're proposing that we reduce line 5620 from 80,100 back to 64,500?
And either create a new gel line or put it in a contingency until we have a board vote and approval for what the plan is going forward.
I think you should make a motion that we reduce 5620 and increase 8,030, which is contingency, by that $15,600.
Okay.
So the board has to approve expending it.
And that's exactly what I want the board to make the decision on, whether those funds are how they're best utilized. So I'm making the motion. Do I need to repeat it?
Yes.
Let's see how good your memory is.
I wasn't listening. All right, I make a motion to move, reduce, what was it, Joe line?
5620.
5620 by $15,500 and move that over to contingency
8030.
8030. With the understanding we will review any landscaping plan and then take a vote on whether we proceed with that landscaping plan and fund it.
Well, I don't think it should be limited to landscaping. I think the board should vote on anything that's ever funded out of contingency, whatever it might be.
I agree that any time you're pulling from contingency, you should vote. But for this particular item, I don't want those funds to be lost in contingency. I mean, I want to take a real effort to evaluate what they want,
And
why
I
they
think in the
want
motion you need to put to state that very fact that we need a detailed plan on the utilization of Pine Island and how much it would be and how it could be used, and then we vote on it as an improvement issue.
So funding would be contingent upon receiving a cohesive landscaping plan for the utilization of those funds.
So your motion is to reduce line 5620 to 64,500. So the variance from 2020 to 2021 is 0, and to increase line 8,030 from 52.4 to 68,000. So the variance between 2020 and 2021 will now be 44,000.
And I might, just not to throw another ringer in this used to be 60, and where it became 64.5, I'm not sure how that happened, because I really think last year we approved a 60,000, and somewhere in the shuffle, somewhere, I can't tell you how that happened, or whether other general manager, and there was something that was funded from, that had to be paid for in this budget that wasn't paid for the year before. That line item got changed to 64,000.
I hope he's not increasing gel lines
well,
midstream. That would be
I tell
concerning.
you, I really believe we agreed to 60.
Well, that's something we should look at to see if any gel lines were changed midstream, because
I mean, I was under the assumption it was 60, and then all of a sudden, when you look at it, it's 64.
To me, that's sacred. I mean, that's the budget we're going on, and
Right.
It can't be changed
I
midstream.
mean, we ought to go back and look and see what that was, what line that was when we did our budget last year.
So can we take a vote on this wonderful proposal of mine?
Give me a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, Melanie second. All right, discussion? Any discussion?
I'm in favor of the proposal, and I think that it's a prudent way that shows fiscal responsibility on spending the money in the HOA.
All right, so all in favor then of the motion to reduce 5620 general ledger number by 15,000, moving it to contingency number 8030,
recognizing that a detailed plan, a utilization plan is required to be sent to the board prior to proceeding with any improvements. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so unanimous, sir.
I would like the general manager to research where the 60 changed to 64.5.
The budget we approved, line item 5620, was $64,500.
Okay.
It was $60,000 the year before.
Okay. I mean, I'll tell you, when we had our budget discussions, it was a struggle to get it back to 60.
Right.
Because there was a discussion to limit it less than that, and I worked hard to get the 60. So how the 64 came, I still.
And just to be clear, the gel lines were not changed midstream, so
Yeah.
that was the budget amount.
Thank you,
and that's,
thank you, Bill.
Okay, so
Can we transition to the other landscaping item, trees? They've requested an increase of, when I say they, I say the landscaping committee and the chair. They requested an increase of $20,000. They were granted $10,000. I think it would be good for us to take a position on this increase and whether we're agreeable to it.
Well, I've always heard that the $15,000 was inadequate to do the trimming that we need to do in the community.
I agree with you. I know the struggles that we had, and
Right.
frankly, coconuts are a serious.
Well, and it's a safety issue as well, and I think we need to be funded to make sure that we're able to accomplish that, and we don't have to delay it because when they need to be trimmed, they need to be trimmed.
Any other comments?
No.
Objections?
So we're talking, they're going to trim twice a year then, rather than,
Well, they have to be. The coconuts have to be trimmed twice.
so this is what the July.
Well, I'm not sure that's why the increase is. I mean, we really.
That's our intention.
My whole point to this is that we should have had a discussion with the landscape committee and to answer these questions instead of us assuming now at this conjuncture. I know, and it's too late for that
Well,
for
we
this
can
time. But going forward, I think we really need to do.
We
that.
could put some conditions that the increase is given contingent on there being a minimum of 2 trimmings a year.
And I'm not sure that that's why.
Fair enough.
But I think that that's definitely something that I know is required.
And I personally know the struggles that we went to make sure that was done.
So,
with the
so
very small
I
budget.
don't think that that's an exorbitant amount for that gel line.
So it's important. It's important, but it's more than just the coconuts, too. The branches are coming down onto the walkways and into the streets and being hit by the, the trailers and the trucks, the actual trimming of some of the branches on the parkway.
You're
And
talking
we
about the
do have
hardwood
more trees than we used to.
Well, that's why we're talking about replacing trees.
I know.
I think that we would pass the city's landscape requirement times 3.
Okay. So it sounds like we have no objections to that line item. Is it fair to say then we have a potential increase? We have an increase of $10,000 to landscaping for 2021 with the potential of an additional $15,000 if the board approves the landscaping plan for Pine Island Gate and some possible repairs. So we would be at a potentially
$15,000 to come out of the contingency.
correct. So right now we're at a $10,000 increase in landscaping for the year over date with the potential of going up to 25.
And is that 10,000 allocated only for the trees?
Yes, it's in that gel line.
Tree trimming.
That's it.
Yeah.
It can't be utilized, or it should not be.
And if you're done with that
Yeah,
one?
please.
Then the property management, I'd like to discuss that. I think there's a big misconception among the community, and I would like to just have this for the record.
Please.
We had a contract with Pope for 3 years that I think was unrealistic for what the going type of treatment and what property management companies cost. The line item for the payroll included a 3% burden, and nobody has a 3% burden. And the items for the health insurance, and then some of these other items as well. So when this went out for bidding, it was found that, you know, where last year our payroll was $375,000, almost every single one of them added another $100,000 because the burden is, you know, in the 20 to 25% range. I think it's also important to note that when Pope bid on this same RFP, that their burden went up, and there was no way you would have ever gotten the sweetheart deal, whether it was a good deal as far as service or not, but as far as what the cost was and what was bid on, there were none that provided for that type of care. So to see that the property management went up, you know, in the $100,000 range, you know, depending on which one you pick and those things, that is a cost that's in this budget that would have been in this budget no matter what.
And just to add to that, we allocated the amount for the increased Pope contract, but in fact, the management company was selected was less than the Pope contract, so we allocated more than we expect to utilize, significantly more.
Yeah, and then
Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. That's
But
fair.
until we have a signed contract, we can't budget less.
Correct.
Because we've got to be fiscally responsible.
And
Be
hopefully that extra,
conservative.
if we plan appropriately, will go into contingency and cash flow.
Well, it'll just wind up unspent at year end and a profit, and it will go into fund balance, which is our fund balance is our actual safety net, not the bulk telecom fund.
Well, that's
as people have said.
That's a separate
I know,
discussion.
but that's-
We'll get to
Yeah,
that. But I
that's
do,
a source of funding.
That's the way it would happen.
I do appreciate that this board is receptive to a fund balance. The city maintains about a 2-month fund balance, I believe. I think that's right. I think Marilyn said 2.
Yeah,
but that is something that is
they strive for 3, but they have about 2. That's what she said.
And we are funding, I think, $56,000, hopefully, into the fund balance and any excess that we would have for the contract. But it's good we're all on that page because that is part of the safety net.
Yes. And I think it's important to note, too, that with some of the vendors, the contracts that were negotiated, the multi-year contracts that were negotiated prior to this board being seated, have escalation rates in there that also were part of the increase. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
What is it?
The escalation rates with some of the vendors.
We had the CenturyLink with the video increase, and I want to say it's like the numbers.
Well, actually, it's down from last year because Jerry padded that number. This year we're having to pay 13 months because we discovered that we were paying at 60 days rather than current amount. So we've caught up, so we're going to pay 13 months worth. So that's an extra $78,000 we're paying this year. So you've adjusted it to go back to 12 months worth of expense. So the number in this budget is lower than the 2020 number.
CenturyLink one. That was the only one for the video.
Even though it's at a higher rate
Right.
per month, it's
Right.
lower than the total.
There's an increase, but all in all decrease.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Insurance line item, I think that deserves a little discussion here because it's $143,000 over what we had last year. Plus, we paid that in the previous year.
Right.
And Bill,
Well,
how was that absorbed?
In this year, 2020,
How was that absorbed?
we're going to have a negative fund balance at year end.
Okay, so really that was not in the budget, and
No.
and so therefore we've paid this now twice. And I would just like to point out that we have a risk assessment committee that I think we really need to move to the front burner so that we can address these issues, and we also need to make our community aware that when these claims are paid, your HOA is footing the bill. So when you see an increase in the HOA fee because of a line item like that, it's because of that.
This
not free money.
$140,000 is about $100 for each and every homeowner in Sandoval.
Correct.
And we were notified of this in February of last year.
2 or 3 days before the
Right.
contract ended, so we scrambled.
And the reason why it wasn't allotted for in the 2020 budget was
Didn't know
because
it.
we found out in February of 2020, months after the budget started. But it was a shock. It's concerning. We have some really talented folks on the risk assessment group, and I know that's on the forefront too.
And I might mention there's another gentleman I know in the community that was a quality assurance risk assessment person, and I think we ought to consider adding him to that committee.
Would love to have them.
So.
and I'm
I
expecting.
can provide you that
Well,
information.
remember, we have two committees. We have the insurance committee that's concerned with bidding and renewals and that kind of stuff. Risk assessments, their charter really is to look for drops in the pavement, drops in the sidewalks, which might result in a claim. So there's two different goals.
Do you need two, or should you combine them?
I honestly think one should be a subcommittee because, frankly, the way you look at these risks are from an insurance perspective. You're
that's
evaluating,
my
and it's important that we have set protocols. And this is something that wasn't done. Set protocols that we have a schedule in which we inspect our common areas to be proactive. And anytime there is an incident, we have a specific protocol for reporting it and taking the necessary steps to make sure our community is protected. And that's part of what this committee is going to be doing.
And I think with any committee, and this one in particular, it's not the identification, but it's the follow-through.
I agree.
I mean, you can identify things all day, but if you just acknowledge that they're there and there's not a real protocol of how quickly you're going to act on it, how quickly you're going to get it solved, then it falls through the cracks.
If you acknowledge that it's there and don't correct it,
then you're
have
doubly
created
doubly liable.
Yeah.
Exactly right. I agree, and I expect that to be a focus in the very near future. I know that we're at a point now we're going to be bidding out new insurance. We're optimistic we could get that rate down. Not promising, but so I think we're on the same page with that.
I think another issue that some of the residents remarked on were the management licensing training for the staff members. There was a line item, even though it wasn't a significant amount. I think it was
$1,200.
At about $1 a door. 16 maybe.
This is something that, again, we want to make sure that we have the best informed employees. They stay current on Florida law. It's important that they stay current. Secondly, professional training is always helpful. With the new management company, it's included in their management fees. It wouldn't be a specific line item.
Can't that be negotiated as an item that they provide?
Correct. Yeah, it's included in theirs. So I just wanted to address that because it was raised, I think, by two of the individuals in the comments. So any other comments on the substance of the budget? Al, do you have anything to add? Don?
No.
Ron?
Just to follow up on landscaping and some of the things that, not to beat a dead horse, but that was a significant number of emails. And actually, I got some emails about this, about the increases and such. And already Don alluded to the fact that there were a number of areas that were not included in the 2018 and prior contract that was included in the 2019 contract. And that got me to thinking that one of the reasons I ran for the board, honestly, was I was concerned with some infrastructure problems, and I did take some pictures. So if you don't mind, I would like to just show you a couple pictures. One of them includes my daughter, to where we were prior to 2019, and to show that, number one, phase one wasn't, phase three wasn't included. They weren't using things like a pre-emergent weeding. The number of of intervals in which they weed, we dramatically increased. The fence. And this isn't a partisan issue. This is an issue I think we're all joined on, frankly. If you could go to picture one.
You're on it.
Okay. That's not it.
Danny.
Okay. Was I heard prior to this?
Yeah, you heard.
I was heard discussing the demarc. Okay. Well, this picture, these pictures are timestamps. They were taken with my iPad. This one was in 2017, August of 2017. And as an example, this was commonplace in a lot of our common grounds, frankly. And you'll see this is a flower bed. There's no demarcation to where the grass starts, or a clear demarcation between the grass starts and the flower bed starts. And obviously significant weeding throughout. Could you go to the next, please? This is a flower bed. There's weeds that are over a foot tall. This was right along Sandoval Boulevard. You'll see a path up to the upper left quadrant, and that was the walking path, and directly to the right of this was Sandoval Boulevard. This is what residents and guests saw as they drove down, and that was in 2017. Next. It looks similar, but it's actually a different flower bed along Sandoval Boulevard. That's the Vermont Lake right back there. Directly to the right is the walking path, and then Sandoval Boulevard. And as you can see, that picture speaks for itself. This was in 2017. Next, please. We had some real issues when it came to weeding around the lake. You can see the weeds that are 2.5 feet tall, encroaching on the littorals. What they do is strangle the littorals, which we want, our flowering plants to protect our flower beds. But eventually what was happening was they were killing the littorals. And then they would come in and spray them and kill the littorals. Also, it was dangerous because it's a breeding ground for water moccasins and dangerous animals that could live there. So when you're walking by, it's concerning. And obviously, aesthetically, it's unsightly. And that was in August 2017. Next, please. I took this to basically show just the general maintenance. This was 2018. The main picture, it's not really showing up well. I think the next picture will show better. Was again the demarcation between the lawn and the flower bed. So if you could turn to the next one, there we go. That's actually was the focus of the picture. Again, we have issues just weeding. They're just in our contract. We had a set amount of times in which they would come out and weed, and it was woefully insufficient. So part of the discussion on the new contract was increasing the amount of time they weed, so we're never in this situation. Could you go to the next one, please? Same example, weeding. You can see some of those weeds have been there a long, long time. Could you go to the next one, please? There were significant areas of just dead grass, frankly. And debris. This was commonplace in a lot of our common areas. That's again, and you look at this, and then you see residents getting citations for their grass dead or weeds in their yard. It's pretty difficult when this is your standard to go point out homes and say, frankly, you're being fined for not maintaining your yard when we have this in our common area. Next, please. Same thing, just no line as it continually grows in. Next, please. Again, weeds. Next. This is a good example of something that I raised a number of times in my neighborhood. This was a common area. And this is an example of not having a pre-emergent. You have weeds overtaking the actual yard, the lawn. And what happens there is it kills the lawn. And so it'll either kill the lawn and it stays, or if you go and kill it, you're going to get these large dead areas of grass. And that's part of the reason we had some extra expenses in 2019, because there were a lot of areas of dead grass because weeds overtook them. And this is when we got the comment that when we asked Crawford, why are there so many patches of weeds? And this is when we got the comment to them. They were instructed green is good. If it's green from afar, let it go. The problem is you're dealing with weeds that are unsightly, and you're citing homeowners for the same thing. Also, these weeds migrate. They migrate from a common area over to yards. So now the cause of some of these yards getting weeds is our common area, and that actually should be the standard. So that's just one example, if you could. And that was 2018, if you could continue. And I'll try to speed this up a little bit. You can keep going, please. Again, I think that speaks for itself. You can see weeds, and you can actually see where they sprayed them. They're 3 feet tall. And they killed a lot of littorals there, and you can see there's no real maintenance. That had to be months for the grass to grow that high. You can go to next. Same situation there. This was 2017. Please. Again, strangling our littorals. Next, please. those are dead littorals after they were sprayed in reaction. Hopefully not from my sending these emails in, but unfortunately they were strangling the littorals. Next, please. There, look at that little adorable little gymnast. Well, she was 6 then. That was 2017. And she was about 3.5 feet tall. So you can see how significant those weeds are. And those aren't littorals. Those are weeds. Next. Okay, that's it. And I appreciate the time, and I appreciate you all indulging me. I was just going through my iPad, and I saw these, and I was going to send them out, but I just thought this might be an appropriate time, because when we look back, it's easy to forget. I forgot where we were and where we are now.
Yeah, my question that I would like to summarize at the end of this, with our new contract, have you seen a change?
I have seen a significant change. I frankly couldn't be happier.
I think that should be the thrust of what you showed here,
right.
To say that you didn't have any pictures showing them what it looks like now.
And I should.
But I think that you need to make a comment that you've seen a difference, and this is not existing.
And this isn't being
right.
critical. It's just showing you what the value we are getting presently. We increased the amount of weeding. We increased the areas that they're doing. We increased the mows, frankly, how frequently they mow. It's not a negative comment, but actually a positive comment in that we are in a much, much better place. And I appreciate the work that this board did, Don did on that contract. I mean,
and the perimeter. I mean,
perimeter.
we had you couldn't even see the fence because the plants had grown through it. There were vines all over it. We weren't trimming the perimeter on the outside, and all that is now a 5-foot barrier everywhere.
It is. And this increases the values in our community, our aesthetic appeal, and everyone benefits from it.
That's what you were part of the RFP process, getting the new contract, and that's what I wanted you to speak on. Is that's why we just the people that hollered 28.5% increase.
No, we're getting more than 28% or whatever that number is of more service.
And I did the numbers between 2018 and today. It's 2 years, there's been a 14.9% increase in the general landscaping contract.
So I think that justifies why we got it in here.
And we're expanding
more services. It's not that we're giving somebody a bunch of extra money.
No, absolutely. I know we're getting things covered that we're not covered,
and we got to throw it out.
And they
somewhere.
wanted a lot more. We fought hard.
It was 450 is what the original number was.
We almost fell out of our chairs, and we fought hard for that number.
Yeah, I think that contract was a real victory.
Yeah, I know. It gives a little agita in the process.
So the 386,000 that was screaming about 28.5% increase, who gets 28.5% increase, that was really justified, and that's really a bargain that we're getting.
But it's not 28.
And this other that we're talking about here, I'm not opposed, but I just think we need to be more fiscally responsible, and instead of just. I'm real easy to talk to if you show me beforehand, but don't try to. Let me try to figure it out on my own. Show me why you want to do that. And if they'd have done that, I think that we probably would have approved all of it.
And we may.
And we might still. So.
And my apologies for not getting that to you, Don. I shared with others, so I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I'm a member of the board too, you know.
I don't think I got it. I made some phone calls, but it was just more generalized. Do you have objections? Frankly, I think this approach is much better.
Whoever else did, Melanie maybe did, but go to the financial committee, so I apologize for that.
Okay, so is there further discussion then on the substance of the budget? If not, we'll proceed then, Ron, if you want, with the source of the budget.
Yeah, it's not Ron. It was just me.
No, I'm just saying, following what your suggestion was.
Me dividing up, and again, I'm not the president, so you guys do it the way you want. I'm just trying to keep this organized.
As you suggested, the source of the budget now. I don't know, Bill, if you want to start, or who wants to start?
Well, I can certainly start if you want me to.
Please.
I'd like to start out by quoting a memo that was sent out from the board, who Don and Al were on at the time, but I don't think it was from the board. I think it was from Don Swindell. And in his memo, which is titled, "Your Association is in Sound Financial Condition," he wound up by saying, "and use the remainder to cover inflation of 3% per annum and operating expense creep of no more than $40,000 annually, and we will have no need to increase base assessments before May of 2026, and perhaps not then if cost of bulk cable does not increase more than $40 per month. So the intention from day one with telecommunications was not to build a safety net. It was to build a clubhouse and then use that money to absorb operating expenses as they grew. And that's exactly what we're doing. Next.
Well, I frankly think we need to go around and take a position on where we stand, whether we want a dues increase and keep CenturyLink, or we don't want a dues increase and we utilize CenturyLink, or some sort of hybrid. I don't want to drive this, so I think I've spoken enough.
Well, I'll start it because the Finance Committee recommended that we fund the telecommunications fund for the first quarter, then sunset that account, stop it, use it to pay off the construction of the clubhouse, and use those funds for our operating expense for 2021. And I support that position.
I do too. I think it's important that, I do too. I think it's important that we recognize that the telecommunications fund, I know Ron was saying CenturyLink, but
Yeah.
it's the telecommunications fund, that we, it was designed with a specific justification. Once that clubhouse is built, the money is there to fund it. The justification has been met, satisfied. We sunset the account, and we redirect that funding into the operations to help us during the course of the year and to build up the contingency fund.
Well, I would like to say that what you've already moved, or what's already been moved, is a significant amount. As I pointed out, it will, over the next 6 years of this budget, it'll be $2.4 million that will have been moved into that, which will have reduced potential assessments during that period of time. What we're really discussing going forward is there's another $134,000 that would still be designated to telecommunications if there was an agreement that would continue to grow. And if that continues to grow, then that would be about $800,000 over this period of time until the end of the telecommunications fund. I think there's some things. To me, in finances, it's good to have a safety net. And I think, did we need as big a safety net as the original fund was providing? I think that remains to be disputed. But I think that the additional, what's remaining after we have done what we've done the last 2 years, that the $134,000, I don't think that it could be just for whatever frivolous you want to do. And I will also make a statement that everyone says we've had frivolous spending by this board. Okay, so we aerated the lakes. We put in some 6 needed streetlights in common areas. We did the sunshade. We did 2 parking lots. Now, what do you think all that...
Completed the Pine Island Road gate that Taylor Morrison would not do.
Okay, so how much do you think all that was? We're talking big numbers here. This is not a big number compared to the $2.4 million that we're moving into operations. Without what Bill just brought up is about $550,000. So it's not we have done a lot of these projects, and we did them on an extremely strict budget, and we negotiated every single one of them and got the very best price. Al worked very, very hard on the parking lots, and with the assistance of Stevens Construction, and we were able to negotiate what we actually paid for those parking lots down significantly, and I credit Al with all of that because he was in there working with these guys, and he got one to match another, and and as we did with all these projects, the street lights was another project. You know, we put our foot down. This is all we wanted to pay, and they came around. So, you know, and I don't think any of those are frivolous projects. I don't think there's any big project like that that still remains, because I think we took care of all those projects. But I think, you know, there will be some things that might come up, and the unknown, the unexpected, I think, is what really comes to bite you. And if you, I like to know that, you know, if there's something that comes along, I still got a little hip pocket here. Right. So I don't see where the $134,000 going forward is amount that you know, we should just frivolously move over to the operations budget. I think we should park that, and then you know, build up a storm fund. I mean, that's not if you want to designate it for that, fine. But if not, I think that you know, this $1 million here, I don't think it'll last forever. I think something will come up that we might need it sometime in the future. And rather than going through the laborious special assessment thing, I mean, we live in a community that we don't have special assessments. When I did the property management review the first time, we went to communities, they needed to have their pool fixed. Well, they had to go through this laborious process of going through a special assessment, approvals, and all in order to get that project done. We didn't have any of those kind of things. So I think, you know, that's a major asset of our community, that if you eliminate the rest of that fund and just toss it into operations, I think you're going to change the comfort level of how we operate as an HOA.
Can I just ask you one question? You mentioned the pool as an example. Did they not have their reserves fully funded? Because to me, that would be a reserve item.
No, they don't.
Okay, but we do.
Well, I want to point that out here in this budget. Good. You've got $300,000 that you think that's what the reserve's going to be for next year. That's underfunded. If you go to the reserve assessment, what they predict...
That's true, but that's just a guess. We could make it 500 if you want to,
well,
but we don't know what's going to resell, so... And it's an offset. Yeah. It's a zero at the bottom line.
Well, if you know that the reserve study told us we need $364,000, then I think you should have that $364,000 in there. And if it's not, and if we come short of it, then we've got to figure out how to make it up.
Make a motion that we change that $300,000 to $360,000.
Well, it's 364 is what the reserve
make a
study
motion
says.
Feel.
Well, I do. I do feel that way, because I think you know, if you're proposing a budget that you know is not going to meet the expectation, I think we're going to meet it this year with home sales. But you know, each year that reserve amount gets a little bit larger, and you know, if we don't meet it, then you know, one of the discussions that during budget time is, where are we going to get these funds to make sure that we keep this reserve account solvent? And we do have we're in much better shape than a lot of HOAs.
Right. And I wasn't...
No. In fact, I think some of our sub-HOAs here have maybe some unfunded obligations in their own right.
But that's separate
from us. And it has to do with us. But I'm just telling you that you know, you don't have to look far to see where it's not funded.
To clarify, your motion is that we increase line 4140, income from resales, from $300,000 to $364,000, and that we also increase GL number 8003 from $300,000 to $364,000.
That's what the obligation would be, according to
your motion?
So that would be my motion.
I'll second that.
Is there discussion? Bill, I'm sorry, what was that first? I got the 8003. What was the first line item?
4140.
Income from resales. I got it. Okay, 4140. Sorry, I just wanted to...
Just to let you know, Jason at Pope didn't want to put 300 in there. He wanted to put
I remember
240 or some such number.
He wanted a lower number.
But that's just a guess. So,
no, but we know it is. But we also need to be aware that when you go back and you look at your budget and you find that you did not have that at the end of the year, then you're going to have to address that to make sure you fund it properly.
Yeah. I think that's a fair point.
Okay.
Okay, so any further discussion? All right. Can we get a vote then to 4140? We're going to up it to...
$364,000.
Hold on.
And where's that increase is going to come from? Where's the income side coming
That is the income.
Home sales.
For,
Right, but
Currently.
they're increasing the
for,
amount.
4140 is income.
4140 is the income.
8003 is the expense where you transfer it out of operating into the reserves.
I understand, but my question is, right now it's 3,000 a resale per home.
It's going to stay 3,000 a home. We're just guessing that we're going to sell more homes.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
They are using 100 home sales, and last year we had 130.
Yeah,
Right.
so this
I
364 is
gotcha. I
probably.
gotcha. I
And
just
this
wanted to
year
make sure it
we're
wasn't
going to
the
be
same
very
amount and then
close to the
raising.
same, because I think we're going to be close to meeting the 358,000 that's in the reserve study for this year.
And I know we're speaking of the future. It is, my understanding, very unusual to fully fund your reserves just from home sales. Some point, there may be a recession, and at some point, future boards may have to have this discussion, and that could impact dues
And I think
also.
also something that we need to go back and look is how much have we overfunded. I think in 2019 we overfunded by a significant amount, and unless you go back and track that so that you know that you have overfunded in certain years, so that when you underfund in other years that you're still level.
You're still in.
So I would charge someone to go back and look at what the reserve requirements were leading up. Well, let's do it since transition.
I agree.
From 2017, and see what the reserve requirement was and how much really went in there, and then are we ahead? I bet you we're in the black.
And we need to be looking at this, I would say, a period of 10 years to get
Right.
a median there, frankly, because this is a marathon, not a race. Our roads were 30 years out, I believe.
Well, they are, and then some of these things that we're discussing here, if we spend
maybe 20.
100,000 or 150 to surface them, that we can stretch
Exactly
that
right.
on up to a few more years on the other end.
And on that comment, the work that we're doing on the roads, we're not just patching, we are
Replacing certain
replacing, so that will extend the life of the roads in those areas. And that's specifically the reason we were cutting large areas and redoing it properly. But I think that's a good point.
All right.
So you need to be monitoring this reserve, and you need to be monitoring is how much was allocated in 2019 or 2020. I'll give you an example. The surfacing of the tennis and pickleball courts and the basketball court was a last year's item that was never done.
Right.
So why it wasn't done, it's slid through the cracks. There was a lot of research, a lot of work done. There was work done about the roots around the edge. There was work done on bidding and things like that.
And I could give a little more explanation.
And we need to pick up things and not let them fall through the cracks.
Part of that was we were worried about any damage to the newly resurfaced basketball court, and any potential damage to the tennis courts, probably a bit unlikely, from the expansion. And so we wanted to get the footings down, the expansion built, and that was a part of the ancillary stuff. Parking lot paved. That was part of the back end stuff that we were going to do.
But I think it's not. I don't want it to fall through the cracks.
No,
I think it needs to be brought back to the front burner.
I 100% agree.
We've got a motion on the floor. Can we call the question?
Yes.
All right, so the motion is then to increase the 4140 income from resales to 354,000.
6-4.
364. I'm sorry, can't read my writing. Thank you. And also increase 8003 to the $364,000 amount. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. So the motion has passed. Thank you.
Since we're talking about reserves, per the clubhouse project projection that Mr. Wells did for us on November the 11th, he anticipates at the end of the clubhouse construction we'll have $264,011 left over. I would like to make a motion that we, at the closing of that project, we transfer those funds into reserves as our safety net and call it uninsured named storm damage to be used for that purpose. Have I got a second?
I'll second. Uninsured named storm damage.
Uninsured named storm damage.
What was that dollar amount?
Well, it's 365,000.
I thought it was 264,000.
265.
300?
200.
Okay, that's what I said. I thought you said
No,
300.
no, no. I could have.
My comment on this, it makes me a bit uncomfortable.
I'd wait till you got the project done.
Well, that's what I said. When we're done, whatever's in there, we can.
I think it's something to consider, and I'm in favor of considering it. But I don't want to earmark it until I know this job's done.
Well,
that was my original beef of depleting everything. And when I first did these calculations, the numbers were a lot tighter than what they were when I went back, because I went through the September financials to see how much we'd already paid, and a lot of our project, $125,000 of it, we've already covered.
Well, my motion was not to move $264,011 over. It was to move whatever's left over. So it lifts the amount open to see what it is.
Is that something you do in a budget meeting? Now?
Well, this is a board meeting. We can do it.
Frankly, I had a couple comments when it came to CenturyLink and our accounts, and that was something similar to that I thought could be a possible solution.
But we have a motion on the table, no?
But he's discussing it.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
just
sorry.
discussing it.
Lean back, Bill.
And I think, frankly, I think it's appropriate to, frankly, we do not have a reserve line item for tree replacement / named storm damage. And I know that's a concern, and I think that we should be funding that as a line item. How much we put in there is something that we need to be advised on, and obviously it's to no one's benefit to overfund it, but certainly we need to have the funds in there. So I think we need to have a goal of how much money we need to get in there and a time frame in which we do it, frankly.
I sort of think this discussion revolves around this balance.
Correct.
And the 134 that we still have unearmarked for operations.
Okay.
And as far as today to be able to decide how to, how much you're going to earmark for what, I think that's one of these things. Like I like to, be able to chew on that a little bit. As with the landscape, if you provide it to me before, I get to look it over.
And that's fine. I don't think anyone wants to be put on the spot, frankly, and I don't think that's the goal. I'm not a...
I don't want this vote to be so that we don't discuss the other and that gets moved into operations. I mean, maybe
Absolutely.
some of that will, because I think that going forward, a little bite from each place, I'm not opposed to.
Right. And this kind of... can we table this motion until the end, or at least until I've had my response to what we're doing, my opinion on CenturyLink and the funding, or we can table it for the next board meeting?
I'm amenable to doing that. Is the second amenable to tabling?
Mm-hmm. I'm second.
It's tabled then.
Okay, tabled. All right. So Don seconded.
Which means that we'll bring it back up.
Absolutely. And honestly, I haven't had discussions, but that's kind of where I've been ending up. And my comments regarding CenturyLink have nothing to do with anyone on the board. We've been working close together. I've got a lot of faith in everybody here. It's my concern when we're not here. And the reason why I don't believe CenturyLink is the appropriate tool for this HOA is what I want to go into. But I do feel that we need to have a safety net. I do feel that we need to have a reserve item line for our trees and named hurricane storms. I think we need to be prepared. Financially, I'm a very conservative person, and I like to be prepared and don't like to give surprises to people. If you wouldn't mind indulging me a bit, I don't like to say a lot, but on this particular item, I think it would be helpful just to kind of go over a bit how these accounts work. First off, I did ask our current management company and our proposed new management company if they've seen anything similar to a CenturyLink type savings account. And from their responses, it seems to me this is very, very unique to Sandoval. In my opinion, having this extra account lacks transparency and accountability, and it could be potentially dangerous. Now, I'm going to explain why I feel that way. Typically, in homeowners associations and condo associations, you have two accounts. You have reserve accounts first, and you have operating accounts. Reserve accounts can be fully funded or they can be partially funded. The reserve accounts are available on a monthly basis to the residents. They are subject to a very intensive audit. There's also strictures in place that must be followed to utilize these accounts. For example, if we want to utilize reserve funds, we need to submit a bar. In front of the community, we vote on that bar. The latest example we used was the paving. That is there to protect the community from us. We want these strictures in place because we don't know who the future board will be. And frankly, I want the community to feel protected. And I feel through our reserve account, we are protected. Now, the other account is an operating account. And this account is set up the year before, in which we discussed, like we did today, what our expenditures expect to be and what our income is going to be. And this board has worked very hard to make sure before each board meeting, the operating account is provided to the community. And that basically tells where we are for the year. And it creates accountability. If we are way over on a gel line, frankly, the community has an opportunity to comment and ask questions, and that's specifically why we made sure these board meetings were open to questions and comments. And you have the financials in front of you before the meeting, because it's your money, and this protects your money. In short, these are the two accounts that are typically in place in HOAs. Now, there's been some suggestions about having this third account for capital improvements. Now, I'm not adverse to the idea of having a small amount of money in a capital improvement project as long as it's a line item on an operational account, because small things do come up. But on larger items, generally capital improvement projects, the standard is for the board to meet, raise a potential project, discuss the cost, discuss the benefits, allow residents to comment, and then take a vote. And then only after then do we fund the project. To fund a large project beforehand, to go to every resident and say, give me some money because I may have something to do, seems counterintuitive to me, frankly. And then it asks you, where are you putting this money? Well, it's not in the operations account. It's not in the reserve account. Where is it? Well, it's in this third account. And prior to me sitting on this board, we had this third account, which had no monthly report. We weren't given updates on how this money was spent, who this money was given to, what we got returned in this. And now I understand everyone on this board currently changed this. That doesn't give me confidence it won't be changed in the future. Because prior to this board, including Don and Al, there were no monthly reports. Residents were in the dark about where their money was. It's your money. You should know exactly where it is. And that creates the danger. So my concern here is not that we don't set up a safety net. Like I said, I am all for having a reserve item for trees, making sure we have a robust contingency account, which would create a fund balance of hopefully we're getting to 2 months. But it's the vehicle of keeping this sort of third account that is not a typical HOA account and doesn't have the scrutiny that the standard 2 HOA accounts have. And there have been issues in the past, frankly. There has been a loss of $100,000 from this account. That came from CenturyLink. That was in 2018. During that time, there were no monthly reports, no discussion on who received this money, no discussion on who authorized this money. The money was gone. Why? Because there was no transparency in that account. And I know people laugh and say, oh, you got to be transparent. But that's what we mean when we're talking about transparency. We're talking about knowing where your money is and how it's spent. As I mentioned earlier, there's concern over potential storm damage. And that's why I think a good possible approach to this would be taking some of the funds from CenturyLink and put it into account that has the appropriate protective strictures in place, like a reserve fund. Therefore, this cannot be spent arbitrarily. It will go before the board, before the residents, before it was utilized. And I'm all for supporting a fund balance, frankly, and that's why we have a $56,000 contingency that should create more of a fund balance with the goal of getting to 2 months. In my opinion, the number one goal is ensuring that every resident knows exactly where their money is. No secrets, no deals, no darkness, only Florida statutory sunshine. And that's what those two accounts provide. And that's my opinion.
I agree with a lot that you said, but I do not think that there was ever any lack of transparency regarding this fund and where monies were spent. What you're talking about, the money that was lost, was money that was approved as soft costs for the clubhouse. The project itself was flawed, and therefore there was a loss. But that there was still a transparency as to where that went. And if you go, I just went through the things that we've used that money for, and there's no frivolous spending. There's nothing that has been behind the back, and I would disagree with you on that one line item. I mean, you're using that as a reason where it was fraudulently spent, and you know, as it turned out, it was poorly spent. But I don't think it was fraudulently spent, because it was spent with the intention that that was paying for the architect when it turned out to be a flop.
And I don't want to descend into a back and forth, but it was never disclosed who that money was spent to, number one. Well, number two, there wasn't a monthly ledger sent out or a balance sheet for CenturyLink during this time. So residents weren't on notice that this amount was being spent, because it's up to them to be the ultimate check.
It is being done now.
It is being done, and you have made sure that, and this is not a dispersion towards you.
And I think that it's just something that, you know, just think about the CenturyLink. Okay, this is the money that we're saving on the cable contract. Okay, so if you go to 2026 or whenever the CenturyLink ends, and you tell everybody, well, now it's going to be $150. I saw one, I got this pamphlet packet in the mail for the board. It's $65, but it's only 2 boxes, which we have 4, and the others are 14 each. So you add another 30 to the 65, it's 100. And, you know, you're never going to find what you've got now. And if this money is still earmarked as telecommunications, and then you have to negotiate a new contract, some of this that's still here, if it's not been utilized by some other project or something, would help defer the shock of that going up $100 a month. So your HOA fee, instead of being, as it is now, $560, it would be $860 just to pay for the cable. I think that I think that, you know, in the rush to totally eliminate this, and just because other HOAs don't have it, that's what makes Sandoval unique, and that's what makes us so financially stable. I don't think there's hardly any HOAs around that are as financially in the financial position that we're in. Reserve accounts, we happen to have this. I think that's to our positive, and to just wipe it out because you want to make sure that you're in line with everybody else. Sometimes it's good to be unique.
Now, I think the other piece too, and I agree with a lot of what you said, Ron, but personally for me, I feel that the entire clubhouse expansion, it was earmarked very early on that this money was going to go to this. That's what it was intended for. To be totally frank, I feel like the community was conned into a bad sales job, and basically the board said, in good faith, half the community voted for a clubhouse, we're going to proceed with it, but we're going to maintain a budget. And for the 80% of the community that doesn't use the clubhouse, they're not getting anything out of this aside from hopefully some property increases. To go back out to the community and say, you have to pay more now because I want to keep a savings account for potential future things, that maybe we can't afford a clubhouse then. Like, if we're talking about $2.4 million increases and we're concerned about that, I do not see in any way supporting an increase when people have been paying for years, overpaying. And now they're getting a clubhouse. Well, I don't use the clubhouse. I mean, it's fine as an amenity, but half this vote that voted for this, if they were given real numbers and they had to actually put money in to purchase it, wouldn't have voted for it. And I just feel like to now punish people and continue to take money, I mean, at this point, this is the overpayment. This is what's in there. You either return that money back to the community or you put it into the operating budget to reduce increases go forward. I can't fathom telling people in the community, we're going to raise money for you now, even though we've been embezzling money for the last several years.
I really take exception to your comments for that. I don't think that, using embezzling and using terms like that has any place here in this discussion.
Well,
and I don't think we've been stealing money from the community either. I find those repulsive comments, and I don't think that's right.
Well, just as a reminder.
Go ahead.
This budget is funding $140,000 extra for insurance. Hopefully, in a year or two, our rates will come back down, and that $140,000 will be freed up either to lower assessments or to put it into reserves or into some safety net thing. And then at the time that CenturyLink goes away, which I happen to think may be within 6 or 8 months, not in 2026.
Right.
We'll come back up to this level if we need to, but
I think your comment about when CenturyLink's going to go away, I mean, if you keep saying it out loud and they get wind of it, then you're probably right. But I think, if you look at the contract and if you read the contract, I think you'll find there's a substantial penalty for early termination of that on our part, and I'm not sure what the obligation would be on their part. So, this early termination stuff that we're talking about here, I just don't buy that.
There's not a contract. There's a memo of understanding. And that memo of understanding says if they decide not to support this service in the future, they can walk away from us with 30 days' notice.
Well, that's crying wolf and
there is
fear tactics.
There is no financial penalty to them for walking away from us.
Then wait until something happmes instead of just being pessimistic about it all the time.
What I'm saying is $140 we're paying in insurance this year. If we husband ourselves correctly, we watch the claims, we watch the risk management, that $140 will go away. That $140 then, if you keep the assessments the same, could fund anything we wanted to fund it with, or it could be returned to the homeowners.
And, again, if that turns out to be true, that's good, but you can't count on it.
Well,
and I think that's the main point here. And I understand the comments about the clubhouse, but the reality is we have signed the contracts for the clubhouse. We have a budget in place.
Right.
And this budget meeting has to deal with what is. And the question is, have we adequately funded 2021? Are we adequately funding our reserves? And do we have an appropriate safety net? Those are the questions I think that we need to responsibly as a board answer. And that's not based on any speculation of what could happen or what couldn't happen and lamenting issues in the past. That's what we are charged with right now.
And one other comment about
if we approve this budget, next year's board will be having to do a budget next year, and they can put that $134,000 back in if they choose to do so.
Well, let's just touch one more base on clubhouses.
Sure.
All HOAs everywhere around have clubhouses. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you're claiming that 80% don't use it, I mean, when you moved in here, you move into a gated community. Gated communities have clubhouses. We have the smallest clubhouse of practically any gated community around. The Coralina Apartments is bigger than our clubhouse, and that's 186 units. So, really, all we're trying to do is to create a clubhouse facility within our community that matches the community that we have here, and it's not something that's a frivolous, big expansion of something that you want. I mean, if you don't use it, that's fine, but you realize that when you moved here.
Well, and that's my point.
So I don't see why you would say that, well, because 80% didn't want it, so that we don't want one here. Well, clubhouses in all these communities, if you go around and look, they're huge.
Right.
This is a modest clubhouse expansion that we've come to. I mean, we came to it in a roundabout way, but what we're really trying to do is raise Sandoval to the standard of everybody else.
Well, if you go back in history, we were going to have a huge clubhouse and a small pool, and Bonita Bay opted to throw the money from the clubhouse into the pool and cut the clubhouse back. So we're trying to get back, but we've still got this huge pool that even though we've got a smaller clubhouse than most HOAs, we've got a much larger pool than most HOAs.
So these are great things.
Right.
They're great. Well,
And that's my point is we have the clubhouse now. That's what that money was intended for. So now that's done. That money needs to be now moved over into the rest of the community, into funding normal everyday things.
It's not going away. You're not. It's not disappeared. It's still there. It's just that you've got a safety net that's going to help you with it.
But it's there for potential future boards to misuse it.
Well, everybody keeps saying, I don't think anybody that runs for this job that doesn't have a fiduciary responsibility and in their heart feel that they're going to try to do the very best thing. I don't think there's anybody that would run for the board in Sandoval that would have some ulterior motive. And if they would, it takes a vote of a majority of 7 people.
How many things got approved last time with a vote of 7 people with one person running the entire board? Well, that's happened in the past. It's not unheard of.
Well, it didn't last. There was a change.
Yeah, we're not here to throw mud or anything.
I just, where everybody has their passion and everybody has their opinion, but I just want you to know that there's more than one opinion here, and mine's not the right one all the time, and I'm not trying to say that it is. Well, but I just...
you wanted to paint the clubhouse pink.
No, that was your idea.
I will add one thing in defense of the clubhouse. A lot of the residents, and I was one of them, opposed the clubhouse because I felt we had infrastructure problems. I didn't feel we were doing deed restriction properly, or there wasn't done at all. Our roads needed paving, and as you saw from the pictures of the landscaping, it was seriously in question. We have addressed those things, and not with a large amount of additional expense.
$550,000.
Correct, and we have pulled the expenses down to a reasonable clubhouse expansion plan that does not have a severe impact on the residents, and I do think it will increase the value. I understand maybe this wasn't presented in the most fair manner.
There were mistakes made.
Significant mistakes. But the fact is, I just want to focus us on that we have to deal with where we are now, and my goal is really to see the community come together and no longer arguing about CenturyLink or expansion or anything. We have a wonderful community here. Our infrastructure is second to none. And as long as we maintain it and make sure that we have a cohesive plan going forward, I mean, we are very, very fortunate. And I think that I think that gets lost a bit, frankly.
Well, since we're bearing our souls,
I did that.
I ran to be on this board, and my platform was to eliminate the CenturyLink fund and to eliminate the clubhouse. Once I got on here, I looked around and said, well, my duty is to all the homeowners of Sandoval, not to a few. And I didn't want to drive a stake in the heart of a lot of people and eliminate the clubhouse. So, again, my goal from that point on was to do a clubhouse for a reasonable budget that we could afford, that we could actually build, and I think we're on a path to do that. What we're talking about is going forward. After the clubhouse is completed, what do we do going forward? And I think that's a discussion for next year's board to make at next year's budget. I think this year we have to fund this budget. And if we don't have things that we can eliminate from the expenditures, then we have to generate revenue, and the revenue is going to come from the homeowners, one way or another.
And I will mention, when I ran for the board, I was for the clubhouse, and I gave my word that I was going to see it to fruition, and that's what I have done and intend to do.
And I mean, obviously, I think the clubhouse will be a benefit. It's just, I think that money needs to stop lingering out there. The clubhouse is being built, that money is being spent, it's allocated to that. I don't feel comfortable going out to the community and saying, now you have an increase, because the other big promise was no dues increases.
The last year's board did not promise a no dues increase.
The prior one did.
The prior one did.
The one that promised
it was raised $2.92.
No, prior to that.
No.
Yeah.
Last year,
Mr. Swindell's memo.
Yeah, but last year, in fact, when it was raised $2.92, it was also acknowledged that going forward that was a possibility. So it's not something that was not taken off the table.
True.
All right, so at this point, is there any further discussion on the source?
Well, I do think we need to fund a new line item. I'm all for the safety net. It's just the vehicle that I'm a bit concerned with, very concerned with. But I like the proposal to put excess of expansion funds into that line item for potential name storms in the future.
Is it possible to move money from the telecommunications just arbitrarily into the reserve?
Absolutely. There are the only way you get into a statutory situation is if you have statutory reserves, and there's a funding formula. We don't adhere to that funding formula.
I really would like to have an evaluation of how our reserves have been funded since 2017, since we became and a report on where we stand, on what the reserve study said that we should be putting in there, and what we really have through this home sale thing.
I make a motion of what Don said, and I say.
And I think that we need to have that going forward.
Agreed.
I think that study that report should include what statutory reserves are, what would happen.
And I understand that. I know what the two different. I know
so that
what the
we've got
difference is.
our options, know what we're doing.
I mean, a perfect example is that when we redid the surfacing of the pool, we used more than that was allocated because we used a different surface that was going to last longer. And so we actually have a higher quality surface in the pool than we would have if we'd used what was originally put and was what the replacement cost was. So, I mean, I think that's happened on several issues. So that we've looked for quality in all these things.
And I'm all for the safety net, just a strict choice.
Right. There's no reason to change from that.
So why don't we, I don't know if it needs to be a motion to direct our GM to have this information gathered to make sure we have the most recent information and we're understanding the trends. Specifically, too, if we've overfunded and how that will impact future.
Well, I think the overfunding, if that has occurred, will be very, very important to us in discussions in the future from the naysayers that, you can't fund it by doing this. And see, look, we've had a year where we didn't sell but 100 homes, and then you can see how you are funded, not just what that number says.
Right. And I don't have the answer, yes or no.
And I don't know that either. If I did, I'd try to tell us today, but I don't know that. I have a hunch, but I could be way off.
Me too.
Yeah, that's fine.
Should we consider, we do a new reserve study every 3 years. We did one in 19, 20.
I think it's definitely every 3 years. So in 3 years, we should do another one.
Well,
that's the norm.
My question is, should we commission one earlier? Should we commission one this 2021?
There's a cost to it.
Yeah.
I think this is more an accounting approach to calculate. You can almost make a graph of how we've calculated it, what the expected funds were amount, and what the real actual funding is, and compare it, because there will be down years and up years, and if we're confident that over a long period of time that's a consistent funding source, I think that'll give people much more comfort.
I mean, there has been a bone of contention that people think it's not a good funding source, and I think when you utilize facts, you eliminate all this discussion.
No.
Okay.
Try.
We have people that send out emails that have nothing to do with facts.
Well, then we'll have to have a fact sheet that we pull out.
Okay.
We ran out of tape.
All right, so
Are we done?
Well,
I can make a motion if you'd like.
yes, please.
I'd like to make a motion that we finalize the budget as presented with the two changes that we made, one to reserves and one to landscaping, as is, and that be authorized for our 2021 budget, and we prepare coupon books based on that.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, Melanie seconds it. Further discussion? All right. All those in favor of Bill's...
Well, just one more thing that I'll add. Are we confident that we have the I understand that we're going to have a remainder for the expansion. Are we confident that will be a sufficient amount to start the reserve line item for our trees and a potential named storm, and that we have the appropriate funding for the contingency? Obviously, you're not going to get that overnight or in 1 year, but we're moving towards the right direction. In terms of the substance of those lines, are we confident that we've provided enough protection moving forward, regardless of the vehicle in which we use as a funding source? The substance is what I'm referring to.
I think I'm confident in the budget that we have from Stevens for the construction of the clubhouse.
I am too.
I've got fairly high confidence in the study that Mr. Wells did as to the surplus that will be left after that clubhouse construction is complete, so that the money that we talked about there is probably within a reasonable realm of expectation, that it shouldn't. And the budget that we have also has $100,000 in contingency in it, so that 264 could be 364.
Well,
We
that's
don't know.
wishful thinking. That's not construction norm.
Yeah, that's.
I've never seen a project
We've got to
go
wait.
under.
No.
We don't know what that's going to be until we get there, because you can't count your eggs till you gather them all up. But I'm confident that we're on the right track to do that. Yes.
And how much would we have as for our fund balance if we're on budget by the end of the year?
Well, in 2019 audit showed a $36,000 fund balance, which is life-to-date profits, but it included a $122,000 asset on the balance sheet, which later on we had to write $100,000 off. In 2019, we showed a $96,000 negative fund balance because of that $100,000 write-off. Because of insurance, I suspect we may have another $100,000 negative fund balance this year. So going into 2021, we may have $200,000 negative fund balance, not positive, negative.
Well, then why aren't we funding our contingency in that anticipation to make sure that we have the appropriate steps in place to make sure that we have
this budget
everything covered?
Is scheduled because of the excess that we have in the management fee, in the personnel, and the contingency fund. I think we'll make up 50% of that this year. That's not a 1 year. We could do it. We could say we want to have a $200,000 profit, build a budget around it, and fund accordingly. But I don't think that's realistic. That's something that took years to create, and we should take a couple of years to alleviate it.
Do we need to increase the contingency to bring us closer to that point, to provide a bit more protection in the event that we're running up against a negative fund balance again? Because I'm not trying to hamstring anyone. I just want to deal with appropriate numbers.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think what we're talking about is that what I guess was alluded to, that we don't have the actuals. We had budget numbers.
Yeah.
Right. And if there is the potential that we did negative this year and we negative last year, that that's adds more thought that there needs to be a modest increase.
Well, we would have been positive last year had we not written the $100,000 off. So that was an extraordinary item.
Well, what I want to be clear on is what the potential exposure is going into 2021 based upon 2020, and make sure that we have a sufficient amount of room in our contingency, because frankly, that contingency fund has all the protections in place that I personally need and alluded to before. It's a standard HOA account. It's given to the residents. They know exactly where the money is, and how it's being utilized on a monthly basis. So building that account up, I'm not adverse to at all, and it would give you more flexibility. And it is pretty small now. So I'm not adverse to increasing the contingency to create more of a balance in the event that there are some unforeseen things that do come up. And the positive side of that is if we stay on budget, we would then increase our fund balance to hopefully closer to our goal to 2, maybe 2.5 months fund balance, which is what has always been stated as our goal. So I think that we should have, before we vote on this, have a discussion of possibly increasing that contingency sum.
Well, there's no problem in increasing that contingency line,
And then
except
hence,
you have to fund it.
correct?
Yes, you do.
So what's your solution for funding?
Well, if we have tapped into CenturyLink, then we have to have a suggestion of whether there's a small increase, frankly, to cover the allowable increase in the contingency. Now, it doesn't have to be anything big, or is it, frankly, I don't see, frankly, another option. And this is only one person. I'm not here trying to speak for the board. I just want to make sure that we're doing this fairly and with some forethought.
I think that's what Al and my position was in the first place.
And it's funny. It sounds like we're on different sides, but I don't think we really are, frankly. I think the vehicle is the only issue in which we differ a bit on. And that's fair.
And that's fair. That's why I don't expect everyone. I said everyone to have the same opinion. If you would, you'd be a rubber stamp board, and that's not good either.
Casey has a question. I just was curious with the contingency and what's the protection there versus, because it's not a reserve.
Well, the concern is that we have been over our budgeted amount for the previous 2 years.
No, there was concern with next boards and how is that contingency line item funds?
It's not that is not relevant to this discussion. That was only relevant to whether we're using CenturyLink as a third account and whether that could be subject to future boards not providing updated financials and such. But it's not relevant to this discussion. I don't think it is, unless I'm missing the point.
The protection he's talking about is that it's a regular line item that's reported monthly, and the homeowners would have a chance to see that line item is being expended.
Correctly. It's subject to the traditional HOA reporting.
Right.
Like we would
Accountability
have
and transparency.
operating. Hence the transparency that I'm seeking.
There's no legal protection for it, just that it's going to be reported every month.
And the promise from this board and all boards going forward that you will have your financials on a monthly basis before every board meeting. That's sacrilege. This is people's money. They have to have it.
I mean, that's this discussion I got from these property management companies, that they could provide these things in a timely manner. And if they don't, boy, I tell you, I would be hot to trot to tell them their time's limited.
And that was a major change that we all put in place, frankly. And to me, it's one of the most important things that we can't move on.
Well, I can tell you from experience, in prior years, I was on the finance committee before I was on the board, and our finance committee meetings would never look at financial statements. We'd talk about security companies and other things.
Does the finance committee do now?
Every month they look at the financial statement. Sometimes we have to delay the finance committee meeting because we don't have the financials yet. So
we need to eliminate that as an issue.
Yeah.
Right. We're all on the same page with that.
It's gotten better,
But the finance committee looks at our monthly financials every month before it was the same time that the board gets it, and then before the board meeting. So if they had a concern about something, they could certainly bring that as a concern to the board at the board's meeting 2-3 days after their meeting.
And that's what protects the residents from the board. And that's what's often lost. The residents need to be protected. Even though they elected the board, they need to be protected from the board. And that's why there are strictures in place with the statutory reserves or expectations with our reserves. So we're at 56,000. You mentioned 100,000. What would it do to
What's 56,000?
the contingency?
68,000.
We're at 68. What would it do to our budget to bring it up to 80, 100? What do you, if that's even something we're wanting to explore? But again, I don't want to hijack this conversation. I just want the comfort there that we're going to have the funds available.
Well, before we talk, do you want to talk about that first, or do you want to go around the table and see who wants to discuss that?
Okay. Fine with me. I'd rather hear, again, I don't want to hijack this discussion, but I would like to talk about it.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
And it was a point that was raised by some of the residents talking about storm damage and
again, this safety net issue.
Well, it's a fair point. The trees is a
Yes.
concern. It has been discussed
They're not
before.
an insurable document.
They're not insurable,
And I'm
exactly.
telling you, I mean, just look at this little storm that came through here. A few trees blew over, nothing serious,
Right.
and a lot of fawns came off.
Right.
And that was a
It was tree
35,
trimming.
40-mile-an-hour wind.
It was tree trimming. I thought it was beneficial.
So, you know,
Actually, the broker we talked to says they are insurable.
But it's so expensive. It's,
But for $600,000 coverage, you pay about $600,000 a year in premiums.
so we ought to self-insure with a contingency.
That's
That's what we're
exactly
talking
what we
about.
would do. Essentially, we would self-insure on this item.
Okay.
And I think what's lost here is if we lose our trees, as an HOA, we don't have the choice not to replant them. We have to replace them. It's an obligation.
But I think we need, you know, when you landscape in the beginning, there's two philosophies. You landscape to what it's going to look like, or you want to make it look great right ahead.
I agree.
Well, we got landscape to look good right away.
I know.
So the fact that you say they have to be replaced, I think you need to have not a landscape plan that's trying to cut things out, but I think you need to, you know, you get a haircut once in a while,
Right?
Because it makes it look good. You don't just let it continue to go out. So I think the same philosophy needs to be put into that, and not say they have to be replaced. Not that we want them to fall over, but I think you have to use some common sense to that.
I won't disagree with you. I would just make sure that we are making sure we're meeting any legal obligation from an HOA.
And I think we need to make sure that we're not just using that as an excuse not to replace. But
Fair enough. Absolutely.
I think we need a good plan that would be done by someone knowledgeable in the field.
I agree.
Just to be clear, contingency now 68, but that includes 15,000 we took out of landscaping that we anticipate putting back to landscaping.
So that's not really-
once they approve it.
So I was close.
So we're really at 50. So if we're going to increase the expenditures for the year by $50,000, it's 1,425 homes.
And is that their appropriate number?
Well,
Well,
you said 100, so that's.
I said 80 or 100.
Yeah.
I think hundreds.
So I took, I divided 50,000 by 1425. Let me do it again. That's $35.09 per household divided by 4 would be $8.77. So $10 per quarter increase.
And that would actually increase the fund balance closer to probably
Assuming-
105,000.
Assuming, and it's a big assumption, we didn't spend any of it.
Correct. I understand the sensitivities with increasing dues, but frankly, I feel a little bit more comfortable with an increased fund balance, with increasing the contingency with the goal of creating a fund balance, which we all agree we need. And regardless, we'll still be short of it, frankly, because that is not meeting
You
the
can't do these things all at once.
I agree.
You need to have a plan to work your way towards that. And I think that was our contingency. That's our thought in the first place. Yeah, it is.
It is.
Hybrid, yeah.
And so I'm okay. Frankly, I would vote yes.
All right. So is there a motion?
We've got a motion on the floor with a second that we approve this budget as presented with the changes we made tonight with the funding as presented. Call the question and vote, see if it passes, and if it doesn't, then you can make another motion.
That's without the increase in contingency.
I want no.
That
It's
is without
with.
the increase in contingency. That's as presented with the two changes,
Okay.
364
So
for
I'm
resales and 15 out of, which was it, sod and plant replacement, and moved into contingency.
Gotcha, because we were in midstream.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that was the original motion that was on the floor.
All right. So Bill's motion, seconded by Melanie, to finalize the budget as presented with the two modifications, the landscaping aspect and then the income from resales and reserves, right, Bill?
Correct.
All right. So adopt this as presented, the 2021 budget, and to move forward with the coupon books.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, so now we're 3-3.
Okay. Robert's rules. Does a tie fail or pass? Parliamentarian?
I don't know. been a while. Where's Scott?
Why don't we take a vote on the second option and see if we pass, and that may just
Well, you can't because we got a motion on the floor. We got to
get too
decide if it passed
technical
or
with
not.
this. I could move that we.
Well, actually, per Robert's rules, I believe, the president does not vote unless it's to break a tie. So
That's sounding.
So Kathy's vote would not count. It would be 3-2, and this would fail.
Okay.
Yeah, that's sounding familiar.
But that's from memory. I hadn't finished typing Google to find
Yeah,
out.
there was something, we had that come up recently in a
I don't think there's any objection on this board. I know it's getting late. Let's see if we can just move forward and get a vote on the second option. And
All right, so let's.
if I stay here longer, I'm going to get in trouble.
Is there a motion now?
No, there is no motion now. That motion failed.
All right, so the first motion failed
Okay.
regarding the.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt a budget with the previous changes raised. In addition, we increase the contingency to $100,000 and funded by a how much was the assessment? $8? $10. $10 per quarter.
To $600 per quarter per house.
Yes.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, Ron, and then John. All right, is there further discussion? If no further discussion, Ron's motion was to adopt the budget as presented with the previous modifications and to increase the contingency to $100,000, which equates to $10 a door per quarter. Is that right, Bill?
We increase it to $10 per quarter per door, and whatever that does to the contingency. It wouldn't be to 100.
It was actually
exactly.
be about 105,000.
Yeah, it'll be a little more than 100,000.
Even better.
Okay.
Well, actually, it's 68 now, so it'd be more than 50. It'd be more than 118.
Well,
so it'd be
but-
about 125.
but that's a special
as is.
consideration,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Landscaping included in that.
Right. I mean, I'm in favor of the landscaping. I just like to
I agree.
make it.
We have to be
Make
careful.
sure we have
what-
a fiduciary.
Absolutely.
All right. So, those in favor? Those opposed?
You don't vote.
I don't vote. Okay, so 3-2. Ron, Al, Don. So the motion passes to increase the contingency to $100,000, and basically it equates to $10 a door per quarter increase in the HOA
I think
fees.
you're increasing the contingency at $10 per door per quarter, and then it won't be 100.
Oh, yeah, figure out that.
That way you will not
Just-
be.
Approximately.
Just- it's to increase homeowner assessments to $600 per quarter, and whatever excess funds that would create will go into contingency.
Okay, very good.
Good.
Casey can do the math. I'm hungry.
All right, so the motion passes. So that was the vote to raise on the HOA dues and the budget. Do we want to have further discussion now on the status of the telecommunications fund?
We've decided. It's
We
not
table
relevant
table
anymore.
that, and then
table
we go
that
till the
to
next
another-
meeting. So that'll be at our December 3rd meeting.
Third meeting, okay, very good.
Well, we've discussed the increase of the assessment, so de facto, I mean, we've already resolved the telecommunications issue.
No, because the motion that,
Parliamentarian told me 3-3 vote fails.
Okay.
so whether Kathy votes or not, Kathy's
Who
irrelevant.
told you that?
Parliamentarian that.
Oh,
Okay, so, no, the motion that we have tabled was that at the completion of the clubhouse project, any funds that are left in the telecommunications fund will be transferred to the reserves. So we have not addressed that with what we just did.
Right, that was tabled.
I'm comfortable with it. I think that the trees is a real issue. And frankly, I like the protections
Well,
of
then, are you making a motion to bring it off the table?
Can we discuss it prior to bringing a motion to take?
Nope.
All right, let's.
To discuss it, you have to bring it
I'm
off
making a
the
motion to
table.
bring it off the table. I'd like to tie these loose ends up.
Okay.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
I'm not trying to. Come on, second. Let's go. Let's get this going.
I did.
Okay. Open for discussion.
Okay.
Okay.
Now discuss.
I'd like to get this tied up by the end of the year, frankly. I think it's a real concern. It's something we've been discussed for a while. And frankly, I have no concerns with the vehicle, it being the reserve funds. I think there's appropriate protective strictures in place, and it provides us an extra layer of protection moving forward. So I would support that as long as it's not to a specific number. It's just excess. And I would set the date at April 1st.
The date at April 1st, I thought it was upon completion.
Nope, April 1st.
It's a budget item on the agenda.
Yep.
I'm just want to make sure we're not trying to keep us out of trouble.
With bringing in a GL new line item, it would be related to the budget, as well as about a majority of these topics have been telecommunication topics. So
Okay.
I would say,
just want to make sure.
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think after construction completion might make more, just with the timeline not being sure
Yeah.
if it would be done.
The issue is the funding, and we're confident we'll have the funding by
Well-
the end of the
This
Oh,
this
okay.
this budget
end of March.
This budget ceases to fund the telecommunications fund on March 31st.
right. So it has to be that date.
But we don't know what the expenditures may be needed for the completion of the project.
It's not going to be done by March 31st.
No. So
But these funds, we have such excess. We have 100,000 contingency, and in addition, we have 256,000 over budget.
264,011.
So as long as we're confident that, and all we're saying is any excess. It could be $10, it could be $200,000 or $300,000 that we're going to start funding that line item. And having that line item there is very important.
Well, but until we complete the project, we can't transfer those funds from the telecommunication fund to the reserves because we don't know how much to transfer.
We're not, I don't think there's any plans to transfer it.
I think that's what he's saying.
I think we're earmarking
April
it.
1.
Oh, I see.
Well, I'm saying from that date, any funds,
It just won't be funded
From
anymore.
that
Okay.
date, from the budget we just passed, we'll put no funds into
Right.
that fund after March 31st.
well, then help us get there. How do we,
Until we complete the project, we don't know.
Well, I would say
how much.
project
there.
completion and not put a
okay,
date.
fair
Yeah.
enough. Project completion's
And
fine.
that was what my initial.
And I was just going back to the April 1st date, because that's the date that we feel we need to fund the project to that 256 in excess.
Yes, that's what this
Okay, we're
budget
on the same
does.
page. Okay.
So my motion was that at the completion of the clubhouse project, any excess funds left in the telecommunications fund will be transferred to reserves and earmarked for named storm. Oh, I can't even
Nope,
remember.
don't-
Named
Uninsured
storm, uninsured named storm damage. So that's the motion that's on the table. With who? Melanie seconded
Yeah,
it?
I'd like to say that after FEMA application, so you make sure the whoever's the GM, goes for, because we saved a significant amount of money by having a FEMA application in early, and I think you almost need to make sure that everyone's aware of that. So depending on the administration.
Well,
But
we can have a long title.
Well, no. This is just moving money from one pot to another pot.
Right,
We
but
could also have.
I would like to
we could-
protect. I would like to protect the money.
Well, what I'm saying, we can have another motion
Post-FEMA.
Okay.
to set
We'll
a
do that.
policy that our general manager at the time of a named storm
We'll do that.
I'd like to be on record for that.
has 10
Absolutely.
days to
do that.
complete the FEMA application for
Right.
FEMA funds.
Right.
That's another motion.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. That'd be
Good
fine.
point.
All right, so the
That's probably
motion
can't
on
be
the
done
table
on this, 'cause
now
that's not
that
a
Bill raised was a
budget item.
a completion of the clubhouse project, excess telecommunication.
All excess funds.
All excess telecommunication funds will be transferred to the reserve, specifically to uninsured named storm damage.
Uninsured, to a line item named uninsured named storm damage.
Okay. It was seconded by Melanie. All in favor?
Oh, discussion?
Oh, discussion?
Call the question now.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so 6, unanimous. The motion passes. Thank you. And did
Well,
you
I'm
want
not sure that we could entertain that because it's not on the agenda. But it's an administrative thing. I would just like to make sure that we protect this money by making sure our GM applies for FEMA relief prior to doing this.
We're adding a line item into this budget.
I think it's fair.
Well,
For uninsured.
Every agenda we have says a solicitation for additional agenda items.
So either
This
way,
was a
You can ask
single.
for an agenda item to do that.
I just would like to be on record that we want to be aware and acknowledge that we need to do and do it immediately and not wait until everybody else has put their applications in.
Well, you need to make a motion that we establish a policy.
I recommend that we establish a policy.
You make a motion that you don't recommend.
Okay,
You
I'm going to recommend it.
We can't vote on it unless
So
you-
your concern is what you're about to make a motion for,
Yeah.
not the last one?
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. I thought you were talking about the last one.
No.
So this is a new...
I would like to make a motion that we have a policy in Sandoval HOA that with a named storm and damage that we apply for FEMA relief within the first 7 days after the storm.
That our general manager prepares the paperwork to do an application.
Okay, as amended by Bill.
and you mentioned prior to utilizing the funds, right?
Prior to utilizing our storm damage GL line item.
I second.
I third.
Okay. Discussion?
Good idea.
All right. All those in favor of Don's motion to establish a policy, an HOA policy, regarding named storm damages to file for FEMA relief application within 10 days prior to using the reserves?
Or 7.
I said 7.
Oh, 7. Okay. Why did I write 10?
Well, I said that first. We talked about that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Very good.
Who
So,
seconded that?
Ron did. And the motion passes 6 to 0. All
I
right.
recommend
For the greater good.
Yeah, let's
Anything else?
please no.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, Bill
Second.
and Melanie. All right, I want to thank you all and wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving and to
You too.
everybody
Happy
at home.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, thanks.
Happy Thanksgiving.